In this video, we answer the question how to create psychological safety at work using 3 rules or best practices that you can implement into your leadership, management, or even just team style. So we'll go through it pretty quick. I'm going to explain what psychological safety is and why it's so important. I'll touch on the research from Google, actually, that says that it is the #1 predictor of team performance. Then I'll share 3 rules that come primarily from Amy Edmondson, who's a Harvard professor who has specialized in this subject throughout her career. And so you'll leave with a few practical takeaways that you can begin to implement in your working life. So my introduction to psychological safety came about a couple years ago when I was working on a pretty big project in developing a custom leadership development program for the U.S. Army National Guard. And it was pretty big. It was just, hey, how do we create the best leaders possible, right? Who kind of create an optimal environment for soldiers to flourish and, be high performing and ready to fight and win our nation's wars. It's like, all right, that's pretty broad. And so I started searching, like, what does the literature say about what are the factors that make for the best teams or the best organizations or kind of the best culture? And pretty early on, I found this thing called Project Aristotle at Google, where a bunch of the smartest researchers at Google set out to answer this same question, basically. They were like, what sets teams apart? And so they looked at all these different teams across a variety of business areas, and they looked at them from a few different angles. So they had executives rate them, they had managers rate them, and they had employees on the team, kind of frontline employees, rate them. So you're getting every level of perspective, and they compared those team performance versus their projected metrics. So they looked at all these different things. They found that who was on the team didn't really matter. Technical expertise didn't really matter. Experience didn't really matter. Pretty much the only thing that mattered, there were a few, but the #1 far and away was something called psychological safety. And what psychological safety is really a feeling, the kind of academic definition at least, is that a feeling that a certain environment or a certain group is safe for what's called interpersonal risk-taking. Now, interpersonal risk-taking means feeling like you can suggest something or try something new or propose an idea or maybe even give some helpful criticism or challenge an idea in a way that is supportive. So this is important to point out that it doesn't mean just being nice and it's not like a woke, PC, safe space type thing. It really means the psychological safety piece is less about being nice and that, everything's happy and go lucky, as much as it's safe for you to take the risk of suggesting something or trying something or challenging someone. It's kind of this open dialogue where there's a culture of genuine and authentic expression and engagement. So it may be helpful. I'll actually run through the measures that Amy Edmondson, so she's one of the lead researchers who has conceptualized and researched and written about this topic. Here are the questions that she uses in her assessments of psychological safety. So this will give you a feel for it. #1, if you make a mistake on this team, it will not be held against you. #2, members of this team are able to bring up problems and tough issues. 3, people on this team sometimes accept others for being different. 4, it is safe to take a risk on this team. 5, it is not difficult to ask other members of this team for help. 6, no one on this team would deliberately act in a way that undermines my efforts. 7, working with members of this team, my unique skills and talents are valued and utilized. So you can see that it's not that you are not held accountable. In fact, if you make a mistake, it will be pointed out, but it's not used to sort of undermine you or not going to get beaten up for it or sort of kick you while you're down, so to speak. It's a culture that values trying new things, but framing things as learning and growing together and working through things in a way that's kind of cohesive and collaborative. So if you keep those bullet points in mind, that gives you a model of what it feels like. What does psychological safety feel like? Well, it feels like I can try things or I can suggest things and I'm going to be supported and not undermined by my team. So how do you cultivate this? Well, there's several rules, but I've watched Amy Edmondson break this down a few times, and I think it really comes down to 3 things. So the first is framing work as learning to be done more than a problem to be solved. So when you think about those bullet points I listed off there, I can make a mistake and it's not going to be held against me. I'm able to bring up problems and tough issues. It's safe to take a risk. I can ask for help. All of that comes when it feels less like here's a problem and we have to solve it. It comes when you feel more like, hey, we're all learning, right? When this idea of this project or this program or executing this process is almost like an experiment where we're all going in and we're learning together as we go through it. So it's not necessarily that there is a right way and a wrong way. If you make a mistake, we may point it out, but it's more so, how do we figure it out as we go? The second one is role modeling curiosity. And the number one you can do this is ask questions. So again, we think about these bullet points, right? It's that open, inclusive, curious, non-confrontational dialogues that are a hallmark of psychological safety. And this tends to come by asking questions. And that goes back to the previous point too, of making work feel like it's a learning experience that we're participating in together. So you want to ask a lot of questions, get very curious. Again, it's less about you're right, you're wrong, as much as saying, well, what should we do here? What is the best way? What is the worst way? Etc. And then finally, you have point number 3, especially as a leader, it's important to admit your fallibility. And this means sharing mistakes. One of the easiest and most effective ways to immediately increase psychological safety is as a manager or a leader, or even as a peer, opening a meeting by saying something like, hey, I may have made a mistake on this, or it's possible that I didn't do the best job of this, or there may have been better ways to do this, or hey, last time we did this project last year, here's how I messed it up. Here's why I think we should take a different approach this way. And immediately creates that sense of safety of reciprocation, where I just admitted I'm not perfect and I'm figuring things out and it's okay to make a mistake and try something. And immediately that person's going to feel the same way, or that group's going to feel the same way. So you want to keep that in mind. Whether you're on a team, you're leading a large organization, small group, or even I would say like a parent or a coach, would be to say, okay, number one, as a leader, I need to role model and admit that I am fallible. I sometimes make mistakes. And it's not that we tolerate mistakes or that we do not hold people accountable for mistakes, but again, it's not held against you and it's not something that's going to undermine you. So you're role modeling that. You're role modeling asking a lot of questions and cultivating curiosity. And that feeds into the number 1 point, which is to frame work as a learning experience. Of course, you still need to set goals and execute, but the attitude or the style of the team dynamic is much more geared towards learning than anything else. And if you do that, you're going to cultivate this sense of psychological safety, which, as we saw from the Google study and now a wealth of other research, is one of the number 1 levers that drives team performance, particularly in environments that demand a higher level of engagement and creativity and performance. So I hope this video was helpful. On this channel, I talk about a mix of things, but they tend to fall under the category of science-based tools for work-life happiness. So here's a video from my channel that YouTube thinks you'll like. You can check out a lot of the references and resources for this video down below, as well as free tools that I publish, and I hope it's helpful. So thanks for watching. This has been Jackson Kirchis. I'll see you next time.